Israel continues its bombardment of the Gaza Strip and imposes a blockade as it strikes back against Hamas.
The leaders of France and Germany gave a show of unity in Hamburg, with Emmanuel Macron and Olaf Scholz keen to set aside past policy differences.
Hamas reveals the planning behind the attack on Israel and its intention to use Israeli hostages as leverage to free jailed Palestinians.
Poland is heading to the polls on Sunday for an election that could determine its relationship with Brussels, but around half of voters are still undecided.
The IMF's latest forecast for the Eurozone's economy this year is more downbeat than in June, with expected growth of just 0.7%.
This is what Israeli retaliation looks like. Explosions lighting up the night sky over the Gaza Strip. Air and artillery strikes hit residential buildings, reportedly killing at least 2 Palestinian journalists. The bombardment comes as Israel imposes a blockade on Gaza, including a ban on supplies of food and fuel. It's also mobilising 300,000 reservists for a possible escalation in the war with Hamas.
אני יודע שכולנו רוצים תוצאות כאן ועכשיו. זה ייקח זמן. אבל אני מבטיח לכם, אזרחים יקרים, בסיומה של המערכה, כל אויבינו ידעו שזאת הייתה טעות איומה לתקוף את ישראל. מה שנעשה לאויבינו בימים הקרובים יהדהד אצלם לדורות.
The armed wing of the Hamas militant group has made threats of its own, saying it will kill 1 hostage taken from Israel for every unannounced airstrike. At least 900 Israelis, including 260 music festival goers, have been killed by Hamas fighters since Saturday. More than 700 Palestinians have died during Israel's counter-offensive. Thousands more on both sides have been injured. Foreign nationals are also among the dead. Thai media say at least 18 nationals have been killed, 11 have been taken hostage by Hamas. Israeli airstrikes on Gaza have left as many as 120,000 people homeless. This neighbourhood in Gaza City is in ruins. On Monday night, Israeli forces struck more than 200 targets in the Strip in response to the Hamas militant group's attack on Israel, which started on Saturday. The Israeli government has also imposed a complete siege on Gaza, home to more than 2 million people. The United Nations has denounced the move and is urging Israel to respect humanitarian and international human rights law. Israel has also cut off electricity, food and fuel supplies.
الشيء اللي صار ما ممكن وصفه بالكلام ولا ممكن الحديث عنه. إشي يعني مرعب وإشي مخيف والناس اتبهدلت، بيوتها ضاعت ويعني وتعبها ضاع الناس، وفي ناس يا عم كتير استشهدت في قلب بيوتها ما بتعرفش هذا مش بيت ولا بيتين ولا 10 ولا 20 كذا بيت يعني.
Palestinian authorities say more than 700 Gazans, including 140 children, have been killed since Israel responded with strikes on properties and infrastructure linked to Hamas. The World Health Organization has called for a humanitarian corridor to be opened. Egypt closed its border to prevent an influx of refugees entering. It's a question many around the world have been asking. How did Hamas launch such a large-scale attack on Israel without warning? Ali Barakah is one of the militant group's Lebanon-based officials. He offered an insight into the planning and execution of the unprecedented attack.
وساعة الصفر لا يعلمها إلا عدد محدود لا يتجاوز أصابع اليد الواحدة الذين كانوا يعلمون بساعة الصفر، ونحن اخترنا الوقت المناسب الذي يكون فيه العدو مشغولا بأعياده. ما كانش في حدا من قيادة حماس المركزية يوم الاثنين الماضي في لبنان. قبل العملية لم يكن أحد هنا من القيادات المركزية ولا من المكتب السياسي.
Barakah says Hamas will use kidnapped Israelis to try to secure the release of Palestinian prisoners in Israel and the US.
اعتقلتهم أمريكا لأنهم يعملون في جمعيات خيرية تساعد المحاصرين في قطاع غزة، تؤمن المساعدات للأيتام في قطاع غزة، فأمريكا اعتقلتهم بطلب إسرائيلي وحاكمتهم وهم محكومين مؤبدات في أمريكا. نحن سنطالب بهؤلاء الفلسطينيين ومن حقنا أن نطالب بهم.
Around 150 people were taken hostage in Israel, including some foreign nationals. Barakar denies Iran and Hezbollah were involved in the incursion, but he says they will join the fight if necessary to protect the people of Gaza.
Paris and Berlin are trying to set aside past differences at a meeting in Hamburg. President Macron announced a European electricity market reform agreement can be expected by the end of the month, while Chancellor Olaf Scholz likened the dynamic between the two countries to a long-term relationship.
Frankreich und Deutschland sind ein ganz wichtiges Paar für Europa. Wie bei vielen Paaren üblich gibt es manchmal auch unterschiedliche Perspektiven auf die eine oder andere Frage, aber es ist möglich, einen gemeinsamen Standpunkt zu entwickeln.
The two nations met as Europe grapples with the energy transition, illegal migration, the war in Ukraine and a new conflict in the Middle East.
Je n'ai pas de commentaire à faire sur l'implication directe de l'Iran dont nous n'avons pas la trace de manière formelle, mais il est clair qu'à la fois les propos publics tenus par les autorités iraniennes sont inacceptables et ne correspondent pas ni à nos valeurs ni à nos intérêts, et qu'ensuite il est vraisemblable qu'il y ait eu des aides apportées au Hamas et des coopérations, mais je resterai prudent sur ce point tant que nous n'avons pas stabilisé des éléments de renseignement totalement sûrs.
France and Germany insist Ukraine remains at the forefront of their thinking, with both countries pledging lasting, long-term support.
Herat in ruins. This is the aftermath of last Saturday's 6.3 magnitude earthquake in Afghanistan. Taliban officials say the death toll is fast approaching 3,000 as the United Nations ramps up its humanitarian efforts to provide essential supplies such as blankets, warm clothes, food and hygiene kits to quake victims. This as the US Geological Survey reported more tremors on Monday in rural areas.
Poland is heading to the polls on Sunday for a parliamentary election that will decide both the political direction of the country and the region, as the Eurosceptic ruling Conservative Law and Justice Party is bidding for an unprecedented third term. But despite the stakes, some 45% of voters are still undecided.
In this group, there are people who are planning to vote, but they're not sure who they are voting for, or they think they might still change their mind, as well as people that are not planning to vote. In this group, there is slightly more women than men, and as research shows that women are generally more pro-democracy and more progressive, if they decided to vote, that could mean that their votes could swing the elections.
Campaigners from Women to the Polls are encouraging women to cast their ballots and make their voices heard.
Na szczycie tej listy Dlaczego nie głosują pojawia się odpowiedź, że nie wierzę, że mój głos ma znaczenie. Kolejne odpowiedzi dotyczą tego, że nie mamy zaufania do polityków i nie wierzymy politykom.
Ktoś ostatnio ładnie powiedział, że wolność to jest możliwość wyboru. Ja bardzo moją wolność cenię, dlatego zamierzam głosować. Nie musimy się ze sobą zgadzać, ale wszystkie możemy iść na wybory.
To, co jest bardzo ważne w tej kampanii, to to, że wiele kobiet zaczęło pytać i nie milczą.
Their campaign is gaining some ground, but around 10% of people still refuse to vote at all because of their lack of trust in the political system.
Całkowicie nie mam zaufania do polityków i myślę, że politycy na to sobie zasłużyli. Wierzę w demokrację bezpośrednią, a nie parlamentarną. Uważam, że głos powinien być oddawany za konkretną sprawą, w referendum na przykład, a nie dawanie carte blanche jakiejś osobie, która być może będzie głosować tak, a może inaczej. Ja nie mam żadnej kontroli nad tym, co te osoby będą później robić.
It seems that in the last week of election campaign, the political parties will be most focused on winning the votes of the undecided polls, as the convinced ones are already convinced. Magdalena Hodownik for Euronews from Poland.
There's a downbeat forecast on economic growth for the Eurozone today from the annual assembly of the International Monetary Fund and World Bank in Marrakesh. The IMF chief economist lowered expected growth in the bloc to 0.7% this year and 1.2% in 2024, both lower than forecasts issued last June. As always, context explains a lot.
What we're seeing in the euro area is we're seeing a lot of support was put in place during the pandemic, during the energy crisis. The energy crisis, prices have been coming down, the pandemic is behind us. So a lot of that support is being withdrawn. And as a result, fiscal policy is becoming more neutral or even a little bit contraction.
Contraction of 0.5% forecast for Germany this year. Global economists are concerned by a real estate crisis in China, where 100 million homes are said to stand empty. Economists still expect 5% growth in China this year.
UEFA has confirmed that the United Kingdom and Ireland will host the 2028 European Championship. The Executive Committee's decision was a formality after Turkey withdrew to focus on its joint bid with Italy for Euro 2032, which was also confirmed at a meeting in Switzerland. Whilst co-hosting usually means automatic qualification, UEFA's guidelines state that there are no such guarantees when there are more than two joint hosts. The Republic of Ireland, Northern Ireland and Wales have never hosted a major football tournament before. The event is projected to generate around €3 billion, and according to reports, Cardiff's Principality Stadium will host the opening match, with the final taking place at Wembley Stadium.